Did you miss me? Did you miss us? Well, it's been a minute. It's not been that long. I guess it's been maybe about a week. But we are now back for another edition of Mountaineer Report here, made possible by WV Sports Now. And we are going to talk about what's been going on around Mountaineer athletics. And there's been a lot going on. It's going to be a pretty active spring as the weather was cooperating for a while, but no longer. Mike Asti here, and I am joined as always by Cody Nespor. So, Cody, I know you were busy covering. There's the graphic I'm looking for. I know you were busy covering some basketball there locally in West Virginia. So, how was that for you? Dipping away from WV Sports Now for a couple of days, but still covering basketball nonetheless.
Yeah, doing the Mountain East tournaments. It's fun. I had kind of forgotten how much fun lower division basketball is, just because there's so much more variance, right?
Yeah.
And teams aren't perfect, and they don't have the kind of skills Division I teams do. So it's a lot of fun. And it's the event. If you've never been to the Mountain East tournament, the event's awesome because it's both men and women's tournament going at the same time. So there's 20 teams there all playing. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it looks pretty cool. I don't think I've been to that exact tournament, but looks pretty cool. And kind of what you're saying there made me remember the first time I called a high school basketball game early in my media career, and I was kind of being overly critical of a team that was really, really bad. And soon after the broadcast, got an email from a parent like, hey, I think I made a comparison of the Harlem Globetrotters versus the Warriors and how that was back in the day, and gonna don't be so hard on these kids. They're not perfect. This is just gonna be what it is. Although the team they were playing was a state championship caliber team and kind of was like the Globetrotters of that day. So yeah, you get a little bit of that. It's not exactly NCAA tournament quality, which we will talk about here at the end of the show. It looks like both West Virginia teams are going to be in the NCAA tournament this year. Of course, the women's team definitely was headed there all season long, but the men's team now appears to have locked things up. But before we get there, again, Mountaineer Report is available everywhere you get your podcasts. Hit the notification bell here on YouTube, and also the audio form, Apple, Spotify, TuneIn, Google Play, etc. Download, subscribe, leave a comment on a comment if you want. It'll help us out. But we're going to talk about some football. So been covering football in spring ball, and yeah, the weather's not really cooperating anymore, but they are still in the midst of their spring ball session. Now kind of 2 weeks in, Rich Rod's still not really able to tell you much about the team. I don't know if he really knows a lot yet. Still early in the evaluation process. Granted, he's admitted he doesn't want to tell us much. Neither do the assistant coaches. And we do know that they're not going to have a spring game. They're going to have a spring showcase. He also said they're not going to show out in the showcase. I'm not really sure what's going to happen there, but we'll get to that in early April. And the quarterback competition, any of the position battles, and they're all wide open. They're going to linger into the summer, if not the fall. And he even joked that he's not going to tell us who's starting at quarterback until maybe a minute before kickoff, week 1. So don't expect that anytime soon. But he did drop some knowledge and some nuggets that we'll get to here in a second. Before we get there, though, the breaking news of the week, we finally got an announcement. We've known this for several days. We finally got an announcement. They have a new running back coach, and it's a coach with a really, really long and solid resume, almost 30 years, recently with Mac Brown in North Carolina, coached up elite-level running backs and NFL quality backs, and Larry Porter is now replacing Chad Scott as West Virginia's running back. We talked a lot, Cody, about the timing of Chad Scott's exit. While it always felt inevitable, it was a hit. It was bad, and he was initially going to be retained. It also could hurt your recruiting. It appears Jaheim is still going to stick around, so it doesn't kill you there just yet. But it was a hit. He's one of the best assistant coaches in the country, certainly can coach up running backs. But now that we see who they are replacing him with, what are your thoughts? Because you literally said that you're going to hold judgment until you see the hire. And for my money, I feel like they hit this one out of the park. I really don't know how they could have done a better job when you're hiring a running backs coach in March after losing one of the best running back coaches in the country when you initially were going to keep him.
Yeah, it's when we talked about it last time, I literally said, like, I have no clue who's available out there. I have no idea how you would put together a hot board. So,
right.
Who knew a guy like this was available? I won't pretend that I knew who Larry Porter was before Monday of this week.
Okay,
but
you read the resume though. It's not a lie.
But absolutely,
yeah.
yes. But as I was gonna say, when you read the resume, it jumps off the page at you. North Carolina, Texas, Oklahoma State. This guy's been at high level programs. He's coached really, really good running backs. It's wild to see him get hired in March, to be available in March.
That's true.
But I'm sure West Virginia is happy that he was. And like you said, I don't know how you do better than this. Ironically, I think he ends up being the best offensive hire of the offseason, really.
Offensive wise, no slight to Pat White, but in terms of experience.
Yeah, I was gonna say, just going on resume and experience.
Yeah.
Other than the offensive line coach, he's the second most experienced guy, and I think you can look at his resume and say he's had the most success. And to get him, months after you've hired everybody else, it's kind of wild. But like you said, it seems like just an absolute home run, and I'm sure they're happy about it.
Yeah, and as much as Rich Rod tried to poo-poo it, because I even asked him, and coaches come and go, and it's almost a transfer portal era for coaches. He tried to kind of dance around it. He even said if Jaheim's worried about a position coach because you get attached to those guys, then he's not going to make it in the league. Kind of paraphrasing what he was saying, because you lose coaches year after year, and all of that is very, very true. But you're dealing with young kids who are going through this for the first time, and Chad Scott was very popular, almost more importantly than even what he does as a coach. He just was so freaking popular and so positive to be around. And let's be honest, Cody, if Rich Rod really believed what he was trying to sell me, he would not have retained Chad Scott in the first place. He didn't have to retain him in the first place. Larry Porter was available then. He might have been able to get somebody else. He didn't have to do this. He did this because initially he kept Chad Scott because he felt that was the best way to keep Jaheim White. I pretty much had it confirmed, whether it be from him or even Steve Slayton told me on a past episode of this show, when we talked about his Hall of Fame induction, that he had to convince Jaheim, and Chad Scott coming back was part of what tipped him over to come back. And Jaheim then kind of let everybody know in a little Instagram story that, hey, the shaking of the head, I would have hit the portal if I knew Chad Scott was going to leave. The only timing that maybe is good if you had to lose Chad Scott in the spring instead of having more time to hire somebody is maybe this pigeonholes Jaheim into a situation where, there's a spring portal in front, but it's unlikely you hit that portal and you're immediately a number one running back at a Power 4. He has that job at West Virginia, so he's not going to get that at Texas. It does appear like he's kind of probably locked into the Mountaineers, even if he leaves a year from now. This year, it's probably the Jaheim White show when he gets healthy. But nonetheless, you do hit a home run with this hire, but this wasn't the initial plan. And the weirdness is Larry Porter is available because of what's going on in North Carolina. They part ways with Mac Brown. He was on Mac Brown's staff. They bring in Bill Belichick, who didn't know him, who doesn't want to keep him, doing the NFL thing there. And it is weird that he just was sitting around because Mac Brown had his ousting in December. And the resume certainly would call for this man to get a job prior to that. And clearly he wants to coach. You maybe would have to ask him if you want to retire or not, but clearly he wants to coach. And I do think it's a chance to build a running back factory. It's a chance to really impress the running backs. It's a chance to make them really excited in terms of recruits to want to be there. If you look at what he did for other backs, even recently at North Carolina. So win or lose, if you're a running back, he's built you up and got you an opportunity and made you better. It's all a home run. Really outside of Zach Alley, he's probably the second best hire of the entire staff, not even just offensively. And Zach Alley is going to be that diamond hire because you're plucking him from Power 4 and he's so young and likely a future head coach. But last year, his Oklahoma defense was certainly not better than what Larry Porter did with the running backs. So recent resume, Larry Porter's actually done better. So absolutely, maybe offensive line with Bicknell Jr., but Larry Porter appears to be a home run hire. We are going to see when we talk to him, and that appears to be really working out for Rich Rodriguez. Now, to kind of flip in here, and again, Mountaineer Report, WV Sports Now, Cody Nespor, Mike Asti, we're talking spring ball, and then we'll get to maybe some hoops and other business here before we wrap things up. A relatively quick show, but wanted to get one in this week, despite both of us being busy, and we're only going to get busier as the weeks go by here in the spring. Rich Rod doesn't want to give anything. It's hard even to really have anything definitive on any of these position battles outside of a pure opinion. I mean, the media, no matter who you are, you basically got to see 20 minutes so far. He's pretty, tight-lipped and close to the vest. And it makes sense. Most programs are, but certainly year one, it makes a lot of sense for Rich Rod to be that way, as maybe as annoying it is as a media member. But he did make a comment or two about looking at more receivers in the spring transfer portal, secondary help, offensive linemen. They're well over the 105, Cody, and they're going to have to whittle that down. And Rich Rod's been honest that he gets on Big 12 calls and he's upset. He wishes he could keep more. He's going to have to cut players that actually are giving him max effort. What do you make of him already saying, despite having a lot of receivers and corners, he has 10 DBs, I believe is the number, and he's making it already pretty abundantly clear that some of them are going to get cut. He's not happy with all of them collectively. None of them have solidified any positioning, and they're already going in the portal. I mean, Rod West literally told us he does not want to carry more than 10. They have 10, and Rich Rod says they're going in the portal to add more. That's the math to tell you several of the guys in this current roster are going to get literally cut. What are your thoughts on how honest he's being and those positions already being a point of need? Is that a concern even so far for you?
I mean, I don't know. I don't think it's smart to be concerned about stuff in March.
That's fair. Yeah.
The wide receiver room's it is a mess. It's Rodney Gallagher, it's Jaden Bray, it's the two guys from Jacksonville State.
Yeah,
I wouldn't say any of those four are, written in pen #1 starters. And then there are other 6 guys, who knows what those guys are, right? I mean, it's guys that haven't played. And in terms of cornerbacks, I would say it's even worse than that. It's it's almost the whole room of who knows. And so it's the way he's done the roster so far, it has kind of felt like throwing darts or buying scratch offs where you're just hoping some of them hit.
Yeah, right? 30 transfer ads, but clearly he's not happy with all of them. He just wanted to get numbers in the room. Yeah.
So it's if you bring in 10 cornerbacks, if in 5 practices you can tell, hey, 3 of these guys stink.
Right.
It's, hey, better to know that now than in week 1.
Sure.
So, and that's, so that
it's just interesting because he's saying that he doesn't know enough to evaluate his team or to do any position battle analysis. Yet he's saying he's going to get more, but he won't go over a certain number. It's almost like he's accidentally telling us he's going to cut certain players, but doesn't also feel like there's enough tape to fully evaluate. So I don't know. Are they really bad in these 5 practices that he already knows? I
was gonna say it's
to be fair.
I could believe him. If he says I don't know enough to say anybody has an edge to be a starter, it's like, okay, I believe that. But I do know that there are some that are so bad I don't want them. It's like, okay, Rich Rod, I believe that. I believe that could become apparent. And and like you and I keep talking about, Mike, he's put the pressure on himself to win in year 1.
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised we're not going to see a patient approach. We're not going to see a, bring these guys in and develop them and try to. I'm not surprised that we're going to see a no, you stink, get out. We're going to find somebody else, and hopefully they're better than you.
Yeah, and not only that, for any fans, because you hear this a lot too, that are worried about those comments by just simply saying, "I'm happy you're cutting players that aren't good enough," and you have the spring pool in front of you, but the spring portal, fans just figure, is kind of the scraps from the December winter portal. You're not going to get the best players. Here's the defense of that, and here's maybe a glass half full take, a rare one from me. I'm not necessarily the internal optimist here, but here's the positive outlook of doing this in the spring portal and kind of trying to retinker whether it be receiver, DBs, whatever position. Indiana, who made the playoff in year one with a new coach and has a program that never even got to that level in 100+ years. You can say what you want about their schedule, but they did get there. Most of their transfer additions were from the spring portal, not the winter portal. So, and yeah, they brought some JMU kids, but they got a lot in that spring portal a year ago. There are good players there. I mean, there are. If you're worried about Jaheim and others leaving, who are your good players, if you're a West Virginia fan, then they would be in that spring portal. There's going to be players like that around the country. So I don't think, aside from Jaheim White, honestly, Cody, and I've said this repeatedly, he's the one player you have to keep if you want to win in year one.
Yeah.
As long as you keep him, I don't think there's reason to freak out on anybody leaving in the spring portal. And I'll even include Nico and Jalen Henderson in that group. You have a quarterback battle. I think Jalen Henderson has a higher ceiling. Nico's getting more money from my sourcing. Maybe he'll win the job. Either one of them probably maybe give you a similar win total. And Rich Rod's going to play the better guy. I get it. I get all of that. But if one of them in spring, before that's even announced, gets a tea leave and says, I'm going, I don't think Rich Rod's losing sleep. I think he legitimately thinks it's pretty close between his QBs. And as long as he doesn't have to go to Max Brown, if he's picking between one of those two guys, I think he thinks it's similar, at least for year one. Every other position isn't solidified. Jaheim White obviously is that one guy that he's even comfortable saying is a starter, even though he's in shorts right now and is quote unquote banged up. If you drop off from him, you're looking at freshmen or just no names or people who have done nothing, who are learning your system and have no production. So you can't lose him if you want to win right away. But aside from that, maybe the O-lineman too, just for continuity's sake, but I don't think he would lose sleep on anybody else leaving. And you're going to have players that are going to say, hard edge is not for me. Either he tells me that I'm cut, it's best to go in the portal, or they're going to tell Rich Rod, hard edge isn't for me and I want to go. That's going to happen in the spring portal. But I think the only player that would cause a freak out is Jaheim White. And there are going to be players in that portal in the spring that are going to be able to be a difference maker on a team wherever they go, maybe to West Virginia. So that is kind of the positive outlook, but it does tell me that, you know, I'll pull the curtain back here. When I had a meeting with other members of Sports Now Management about kind of the next few months, a lot of comments were, well, like May, that maybe won't be as busy of what's coming up. And, you know, something in my personal life may make me not as available in June. But, you know, if something happens in May, that's not as crazy. And I kept saying, you listening to Rich Rod? It might be pretty crazy because maybe not for you, but it might be for me if they're going to do 30 again. And it might not be what they did in December, won't be 30 players. But I've heard comments of half a dozen just in the secondary alone. That's what he's trying to do. So the other part of it, though, Cody, is, and this is true, funny, and some thought this was a shot at the previous staff, but Rich Rod made it very clear that no matter what happens, if Rodney Gallagher is getting defensive snaps in the secondary, we did a crappy job of building this roster. Last year, Rodney Gallagher got snaps in the defensive secondary. Now, Neil Brown tried to smooth it over and kind of admit they did a bad job building the roster, and they didn't hit on those transfer additions, certainly in the secondary with Garnett Halls and company, unlike when they did with Beanie Bishop a year earlier. But that he also wanted to give Rodney Gallagher some more opportunities because at that point, the receiver room was kind of loaded with Traylon Ray and Hudson Clement, etc. It's not loaded right now. There's plenty of room for him to potentially be that inside guy. And secondarily, that probably is true. He's best suited as a receiver. If he's going to be anything, he's a great athlete, but it didn't really work out even when he was trying to do nickel. What do you make of Rich Rod, you know, kind of making a joke? Number one, do you think there's any part of him that's throwing subtle shots at the previous staff, whether it be Brown or anybody? Because there are some that do believe that, is certainly when you saw Matt Moore throw the hashtag hard edge when he was leaving. Some believe there's some animosity there and he's throwing some shots. And then secondarily, do you like to hear that Rodney Gallagher is not going to be trying nickel, or did you actually think that maybe made some sense? There actually are some people that think he's better suited as a DB than as a receiver, but it didn't really work out last year either.
Yeah. You know, I think the biggest thing is like Rich Rod's just telling the truth. Like
he is.
Nobody's going to pretend the defensive back room last year was even good, like acceptable. right? And you know, Rodney Gallagher, he wasn't bad when he played. You know, he probably played 20 snaps the
Okay.
whole season.
Yeah.
He wasn't bad. But you're right, and you mentioned the important context was, you know, at the beginning of the year, he wasn't a mainstay in the receiver rotation because the receiver rotation was really deep, and it was just kind of a way to get him out there. And like I said, he wasn't terrible.
He made receiver plays as the year progressed too. He made
did.
more plays
Oh
as a
my,
receiver.
he was so much better than I thought
Yeah,
he'd be.
the Kansas game, yeah, 100%.
Yes. And so absolutely, I think, you know, now when you look at the context of it all, it's, hey, if Rodney's not like our number one option or our number two option, like we've messed up somewhere.
Or at least the inside option, yeah.
And if we're having to play him at nickelback, we've really messed up somewhere. So I think, you know, more than anything, Rich Rod's just telling the truth of how the roster is.
Is he just honest, or do you think there's a shot there at all?
I don't know. Like, there's been little jabs.
I know that's what I mean. I just
like,
missed the first one, but there's
so
a lot. There's every presser. It seems like there's a jab. To be honest,
you know, I also think he is trying to be funny.
Yeah.
But I don't know. You like, I think the more like percentage of his brain he spends thinking about taking digs at Neil Brown, it's like,
yeah, 100%.
Why do you care? Like, you have bigger issues right now. So like,
well, it's the same thing as when you get fans talking about Neil Brown. Still, there are still fans who bring every comment. It's like, well, this didn't happen with Neil Brown, or you know, you're hearing this Neil Brown, or there's people that are continuously still beating the drum on Neil Brown. It almost feels like there was an addiction to criticize Neil Brown, and they're trying to wean themselves off of it, and they're going through withdrawal of not having Neil Brown around. So yeah, I do not think that he is in any way before presser saying, how can I jab Neil Brown? Or how can I jab the other staff? I hope not. I'll say this, Cody, if he is spending even 1% of his brain worried about Neil Brown, West Virginia got some problems, because he has a lot of pressure on him, and Neil Brown's gone, and you know, losing will be the only thing that'll make Neil Brown look better. So you can't do that. And if you're worried about Neil Brown, you're headed in that direction. I don't think he's intentionally jabbing Brown. I do think he's just really an honest guy. And let's face it, when you're looking at the Texas Tech film that he made comments about, when you're talking about Gallagher playing defense, when he was brought in to not play defense, yeah, I mean, they're just honest assessments, and it didn't go well for Brown at the end. But it does feel like there's one. I mean, I dismissed the Texas Tech thing, but we're hearing this every presser. There's a could be considered a jab. I don't think it's intentional, but it's funny, and maybe he's trying to be funny. But
I was gonna say it's. He kind of has the same humor that Bob Huggins had, but he doesn't deliver his jokes as well as Bob did. Because Huggins was funny.
It was a very dry, sarcastic, matter-of-fact funny, though.
And it seemed Rich Rod has that style of humor, it seems like, but he just doesn't land the jokes as well. So they seem like right. So they seem like, oh, is he taking a shot at somebody? It's like, I think he's just telling a joke, and it doesn't land like Huggins did. But yeah, I mean, you said it right. Like, if he's spending any amount of his time trying to thinking up insults, it's like, what are you doing, man? So
no, I don't even know why the fans.
So no, I mean, I also why would don't read into who cares? Like, Neil got fired. Who cares? He's not here.
Yeah, I don't even think Neil cares or Neil's aware. I mean, unless one of us tells him, he's probably not going to be aware. I doubt he's watching these pressers, but it's just
he's got his new job. He's got stuff to worry about.
Yeah, I mean, it's just funny, especially the Gallagher comment, and then when he said he threw up when he watched the Texas Tech film, and then he watched a little bit more, and then he got sick again. I mean, that's just true. I mean, I would vomit when I watch the film. I wish I didn't cover the game and watch it. It's bad. Yeah.
I was gonna say that just is another true thing. That game was awful.
Yeah, it's one of the worst. I guarantee you, for a coach, it's one of the worst pieces of film to watch.
Yeah.
Around. And actually, Rod West literally said that he is not going to watch last year's film because he thinks it's unfair to the incumbent players and wants to give them a clean slate. Funny enough, clearly Rich Rod doesn't subscribe to that, and he did watch the film. But to be honest, Cody, that's probably the fairest way to go about it if you're a coach there now. Do not watch the film. It's a different system. It was different. Just stop caring about last year and let's power through to the present day.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was a funny comment because if I'm not wrong, the only defensive back that actually played at all last year was Jacoby Spells.
Spells is the guy, yeah.
So, like, okay, don't watch his film. It wasn't any good.
Yeah, it was good 3 years ago. Like he's been around forever. It was good in the Virginia Tech game when he made a pick at the end. But yeah,
I don't know if I don't know if he meant like he's not watching any of the new guys' films or specifically just from West Virginia guys. But
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's if you're gonna have a transfer portal team, I think that's a decent way to go about it. You don't prejudice yourself.
Yeah.
So
I think it's a decent way to go about it. I mean, Rich Rod did watch some film. He mostly watched some film on Nico, which I think is interesting. But again, it's hard to get that as more than what we know right now in the quarterback battle.
Yeah, like you mentioned, we got to see like 15 minutes practice the other day.
Right.
It seemed like Nico was with the ones. Just
it seemed like it, but yeah,
just based on who he was with, but also, I don't know if there are set ones and twos or if they're just mashing guys together. Like
there's certainly no ones and twos distinguish at all. And I do think that it looked like Nico was kind of with the quote unquote of what the ones could be. But what I will say for the other end of that coin, it also looked like Pat White was coaching up Jalen Henderson more than Nico. He kind of was attached to Jalen more than he was Nico. And maybe they're more similar, even though Jalen's bigger than Pat White was or is. So think of that what you will. Like, would you rather be mentored and have the best quarterback in program history, leading you individually, or would you rather be with the ones when there really are no ones in, practice? What was that, 4-3 at the time?
4,
yeah. So
also it was the last 10 minutes of practice.
Yeah, I mean, Rich Rod literally said, because somebody actually asked him, well, what were you doing there with the offensive linemen? They were kind of lined up weird. They're almost, and he literally said, I'll put them in a circle next time you guys are out there. He's just trying to have some fun. Like he probably was, maybe the ones he showed us with were actually the twos, and we don't know. So like, you can't, people are, if you want to watch this and try to aggregate, oh man, source, when it's really us talking and you're just going to say source, that Nico's in the ones, be my guest, but they might actually be the twos. Like Rich Rod is not showing us anything to this point. And again, I don't blame him. The Gallagher comment was funny. I think most of what we expect for them to do in the portal in the spring is kind of what he's already saying. And I do think one positive tidbit, again, it makes sense for him not to be pleased with the team right now. I do think, Cody, I think I can know him well enough, just when I was a student fan to even now, and just knowing about him, that even if he saw a player that he loves besides Jaheim and says, oh, that guy is a clear starter, I love him now, number one, he would be scared to death to bring him up because he has the spring portal in front. And Jaheim's the only one that opposing teams probably know is locked in. And number two, he always tried to send messages in these pressers more than a lot of other coaches. Huggins did this too. Old school coaches do this, that I don't think he wants any player to be able to relax and say, I'm locked in early March. I think he wants everyone on that roster to think, I better bring it hard edge every day or I'm not going to play. And if I want to play here, I got to keep bringing it hard edge every day. So I don't think he wants anyone to be comfortable. And the only thing I will add, I don't know if you heard this, so I do want to get your thoughts on it as well. And I asked Rod West about this too, who we talked to right after Rich Rod today, that Rich Rod was kind of honest and candid with a little criticism of his coaching staff, where he said that something our coaching staff has to do is be better at pointing out when a player is either quote unquote soft or lazy. I shouldn't have to be the one who's yelling and telling them that they're being soft or lazy. They should know when that is happening and should point it out. They need to show more initiative. Paraphrase him, but kind of what he was saying. And Rod West said, yeah, and I like, are you sure when you know what Rich Rod thinks is soft and lazy? Because his definition might be tougher than some other coaches. Is that maybe the issue there? What do you think of that? Because he did kind of say that you guys are being timid and shy about pointing it out, and he's having to yell it. And Rod said, no, I know what's soft and lazy. Rich Rod's very clear to us was soft and lazy. It's not the same as every coach, but we know what it is, and maybe we need to get better in pointing it out. So that was just interesting to me that a couple pressers in, he doesn't really want to give names of players yet, positive or negative, but he is willing to collectively say the coaching staff is not doing something well, even though he believes it to be a great staff. Maybe he's trying to kick them in the pants as well, and Rod West took it on the chin. But that's interesting. I don't know every coach in America that would hire somebody and then 2 days later would say, well, they're not getting it done in this one aspect.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. And you and I have talked about it a lot. There's like no experience on this staff. And so I think, like you said, he sends messages to his players. He sends a very, very direct message to his coaches of like, I'm sure it's, hey, I brought you guys along with me, or I'm giving you a shot here at a big time school.
Yeah.
You better show up and do it and make it work, or else I'm getting fired. Right.
Yeah. And if it doesn't go well year one and he's not going to get fired after 1 year, people on the staff are going to go. I mean, they're going to have to change something.
Yeah. So, like I said, very, very transparent. Pick it up, you guys. But you're right. It is. I mean, it's odd. It is odd to hear that.
I just think it's odd. I mean, how many coaches are going to say that a coach they just hired is doing something, even if it's minor? It's minor, but doing anything poorly. Usually a coach defends his guys to no end. Neil Brown did that. He would defend his guys to no end. He literally admitted that he pounded the table to keep his defensive staff after 2022 being so bad, and they had a good 2023. Rich Rod seems like he would go into the end of the year meeting if they don't win and tell Ren Baker, hey, this coach sucked. This coach sucked. We're getting rid of him. Like, I mean, I love honesty like that. I think a lot of fans do too. You got to appreciate it, but it's definitely been different. And it's just interesting that he did it to the coaching staff. And I do think another positive of that is, Cody, and even the way Rod West answered it, I think Rich Rod picked his guys, and he alluded to this when he kind of tried to defend Rhett Rodriguez, his son, being the quarterback's coach, and even Noah Devine, who does not have the coaching resume that, say, Pat White does as a former player, and elevating him, and Travis Trickett, who's been recently fired, but bringing him in, fired from a lesser job, but bringing him in. And Rich Rod defended all those moves by basically trying to go in the direction of, I need to have the right guys for me. Doesn't mean they're the right guy for every program. They're the right guy for me because of their personality. And I think part of the personality thing, because there are some that are vocal and Rich Rod like, and there's others like Pat White, Rhett Rodriguez, that are very calm, cool, and collected and never yell at anybody and are arguably shy. But Rich Rod probably knows there's one common theme. And this, I think, is how Rod West answered that when the question was, well, what do you think of basically being criticized a couple of days, into the week here and very early into the job? And the coaching staff appears to be very mentally strong and have very thick skin. He didn't bat an eye. He was like, yeah, he criticized me. We got to get better at that. No big thing. Like, a lesser assistant coach maybe would, they might not tell the media, but they might go to Rich Rod and be like, hey, you're cutting my legs out from under me a couple weeks in the job. I don't appreciate that. That could cause dissension. I don't know if every assistant coach would enjoy their head coach, every presser, subtly bringing things up that are negative. Because, Cody, if he's going to say that now, imagine if they say lose the backyard brawl 35-34 where the offense scores. Clearly the next press conference, he's going to go in there and make it very clear the defensive staff didn't get it done, probably throw them right under the bus. Not that he wouldn't take it on himself as well, but it doesn't appear he's going to be giving you defensive press conferences if there's clear issues on the staff. And it also appears like he wouldn't be afraid, because Neil Brown made it very clear he didn't like to do in-season coaching decisions until he eventually had to with Jordan Leslie. It certainly feels like that Rich Rod would not be scared to fire somebody in the middle of a season if things are going poorly. So, and most of the staff has multiple years on the deal, except for Pat White, ironically. But yeah, it's a 1-year deal, so take that what it is. But again, that it just was interesting to me. I mean, I don't think it was intentional. I don't think he was trying to be a dick. But when you say they got to get better at this, and I shouldn't keep hearing myself, I do think it's a message, Cody. I would imagine. So we heard that on a Thursday. I would just recommend to the staff, and I'm sure that, they heard that loud and clear, that on the Friday, the next day at practice, that if anyone's soft or lazy, they probably are waking up in the morning saying, we don't want to hear Rich Rod yell it. We got to say it. Like if Rich Rod's yelling it after just telling the media the day before he doesn't want to yell it anymore, we're messing up. So he also kind of was letting the players know and them know, the leash is off. Feel free to yell. Like maybe they're figuring things out too, but feel free to yell. So that was just interesting as well. Mountaineer Report here, Cody Nespor, Mike Asti. We're going to put a pin in football there, despite several weeks left of spring ball. So a lot more coverage coming your way, but that puts a pin in for this show. And I just do want to hit on, covered a lot of basketball this week, obviously, and the Mountaineers, they do get the victory against Josh Eilert in Utah. They do hang on to get a win. They come back from a sluggish start. Javon Small picks it up at the end. They almost blow it, but they end up with the win. I've asked you this a couple times, and you once had them where you were confident, then you wanted to pivot away. You didn't want to lock them in yet. It feels like they're locked into the tournament no matter what happens, even in the regular season finale as we're recording this before that UCF game. Are you there now and giving them locked into the tournament?
Yeah, so I mean, we've been talking for several weeks that 18 has always kind of felt like the magic number for wins. And they're there.
For us, a lot of people said 19, but for us,
yeah. So like I do, it feels like they're in no matter what. Just all the bracketologists have them firmly in. They're not really on the bubble right now, and it's hard to see that changing with one regular season game and the conference tournament left. And it's interesting, Mike. It's if you look at it at the last few weeks, like on the whole, they actually haven't been playing that poorly. I know, like, as we've gone through it, it's felt like a real slog lately, but like, I was kind of looking at it the other day and really
almost beat Baylor. I mean, what that win would have been
since the loss to TCU, they lost in overtime at Baylor. They lost to BYU twice, and BYU's playing like world beaters recently, and they lost to Texas Tech, who was a top 10 team. And then they've won all the other games. And it's like that's a really not a bad stretch. It's
almost blew two of them, but yeah.
I was gonna say it's felt much worse than it actually is. And I think to win, to go and win, the second game of a road trip on the road, out west against a team that's not terrible, right? They fired their coach, but they have a winning record. They've beaten some teams. Now sitting at 18 wins, something else, I've said is they're going to have the best resume of any team in their win bracket. Yeah. So they'll have the best resume of any 18-win team. Sitting here right now, it would be very, very, very hard for them to not make the tournament.
I think what somebody said, I forget who it was, but somebody actually made the comment after the win that you would take some wacky shit for them not to make the tournament at this point. Sorry for the cussing there, but I had to bring it for the quote. And yeah, I think that's where you are. I mean, I honestly, again, we're recording this in front of the UCF game. I legitimately feel like they shouldn't lose and it wouldn't be good. And they're favored to win and they're better and they should win. But if they do somehow sleep through the game and lose even by double digits, I think they're still a tournament team. They have 6 quad one wins, 4 ranked wins, 3 top 10 wins. And these teams necessarily aren't in those ranks now, but they were then at that point. It matters what they were at that point. They now have the 18-win total at minimum, and it could be more, certainly with the conference tournament in front. They've proven they probably can win a game there or two. But even if they don't and they somehow just lose out and then you wait for March Madness, I think now Lenardi, Andy Katz, everybody has sent the message. Because, Cody, you mentioned how they're now not on the bubble now. They really weren't on the bubble prior to Utah. They lost to BYU and they didn't move. They didn't move. They were in the same spot in every bracketology, even after the game. And if you looked at that road trip, BYU was a much worse matchup than Utah. People were scared because of the Eilert factor, but they're who they are. Okay. They weren't that good. And West Virginia actually was an underdog going into the game just simply because Utah was at home. So they almost blew it, but the fact that they won and they were even in that position is a feather in their cap. And it almost tells me that there was a wacky play that even if they would have lost to Utah, they might still get in this tournament with or without the UCF win. Because as you're saying, I think to the point that despite the slide and even when they've been this roller coaster ride, Lenardi and others are probably sitting there saying, I hear they don't look like a tournament team, but the bubble's not that great, and they have 3 top 10 wins. How can I have a team not get in that won in Lawrence, that beat Gonzaga? And again, these are not the same Gonzaga and Kansas teams of even years ago. These are down years, but they're still tournament teams. They're still good. It's still tough to beat those teams. When you have about a 500 record in the Big 12, the ACC is down this year. The Big 12 is still the top conference. I just don't see how, especially when you're only taking, there's only going to probably be 3 ACC teams in, so you're going to get a lot more in the Big 12 than maybe even in a normal year. And West Virginia definitely deserves to be there. They had a lot of adversity this year. Obviously, if Tucker was there, they probably would have more wins and even a better resume. But they probably played themselves out of a solid position in the tournament where they had a solid seed line, but they're definitely in the fold. And geographically for the fans, they got themselves in a better spot where maybe it's in Cleveland, maybe it's in Raleigh, Lexington really at the worst. Like you can maybe go to that first weekend. So we'll see what happens, but they're even a team, Cody, that I'll say this, and I'm not predicting them to go ahead and win a Big 12 tournament or go ahead and make any Final Four run or anything wacky like that maybe people were talking about in January or even December and November, the thoughts of Tucker DeVries being a part of this team and what their ceiling could be. That's not going to happen now. They might even be a one and done. But number one, even if they are a one and done, it's still a successful year to get in the tournament. In year one with DeVries, a transfer roster, Tucker playing 8 games, and all the adversity the last couple of years to even get in is crazy and wild. And so that right there needs to be said. And secondarily, and almost just as important, they're not going to be a matchup that I think anyone wants to have on their bracket. Because, yes, you might be able to beat them, and, yes, you might even be able to beat them comfortably. We've seen that with good teams, Texas Tech, etc. I did see one out there have them against Maryland. I think that'd be a catastrophic matchup, and they probably would get blown out because Maryland's been a relatively consistent top 25 team for months, even though they've had their hiccups. But even if that is the situation, they are such a grinder defensively and play so hard defensively all through games. Even when they're not shooting, they are playing so hard defensively all the way through and are just such a brutal team to face defensively that you may beat them, but you're gonna need to get in the hot tub after the game, and you're gonna really remember the Titans style. Remember the day you played this Mountaineers team. So I don't think they're a team that anybody wants to play. Like I don't think anyone's sitting back saying, "Oh man, we got a lock win." That maybe there's some 10 seeds out there that's the case, but I don't think that's the case with this West Virginia team. And again, that's a credit to Darren DeVries. There's a chance. I don't know. I'll get your thoughts on this before we end the show. We talked weeks ago that Javon Small and Darren DeVries, we both wrote about it in different capacities, that they were the leader for Coach of the Year and then Player of the Year. But then we both kind of admitted on this show that maybe they lost those awards, even if they still made the tournament. Where are you now? Because Eilert gave some praise. It feels like that by them getting in the tournament, maybe they almost got themselves the awards back. Did they get them back? Like maybe DeVries and Small maybe actually are still the front runners for Coach of the Year and Player of the Year, even though recently it's not been what it was earlier in the season.
Yeah. I got a list of things to say. One, the biggest, you mentioned the bubble horrendous this year. The biggest indictment of the bubble really is bad. Oklahoma is considered to be on the right side of the bubble. They are 5-12 in the SEC. And they're considered on the right side of the bubble. Two, I think Javon is still there in terms of Player of the Year. I don't view him as the front runner right now, but I think he's right there. And if he has a crazy Big 12 tournament.
Okay, so he's not the front runner to you though?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Or does that get announced before the tournament? That's going to get announced before, isn't it?
It gets voted on before.
It's voted on. So
I'm not 100% on when it gets announced, but I know the vote should come in before 100%.
So maybe I don't think he's a front runner. I think there's better, but I think he's going to be there.
I could argue a case for him for sure. If you want it depends on what you think of whether it's the best player or the most valuable. Like if you're talking about MVP value, if you take him off West Virginia, they're not even close to a tournament team.
Oh yeah,
and he probably is the MVP of the Big 12, but it is more of a most outstanding player type of thing from what
Yeah.
people normally vote. So we'll see, but the votes should be before the tournament. Yeah.
Yeah. For coach of the year, I think there's just too many like good stories in the league this year. Kevin Young at BYU, the guy at Texas Tech,
Yeah, Texas Tech.
Kelvin Sampson. I mean,
he might eventually got to get one.
I mean, he's coaching a 1 seed. They're the heavy favorite to win the conference tournament. I don't think anybody would blink an eye at him winning.
Yeah.
So that, like, coach of the year, I think is probably out. Player of the year, like I said, I think he's still there. Like, he's still one of the best players.
There's a better chance for Javon than Darren DeVries then.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
And then, like you mentioned, like this isn't a fun team to play against. Like, nobody wants to draw them in the first round. Like, BYU killed them. Do you think BYU had fun in that first half? That was not a fun half of basketball for the Cougars. So you're right, Mike. In like, if they're the 10th seed, it doesn't matter who draws them. They're not going to be excited about playing a 10th seed. They're going to be like, "Damn, why couldn't we play the 9?" Because just no matter the matchup, and you said it, they're just going to grind you down for 40 minutes, and they're the kind of team they're just going to drag you into the mud and roll around with you, and somebody's going to win, and it's going to be ugly. And so that's like you said, am I going to predict a Big 12 title? Am I going to predict a Final Four? No. I don't. I wouldn't be shocked if they win a couple games in Kansas City, and then maybe they win a couple games in the tournament. Like, would that be shocking? No. Also, would it be shocking if they go 1 and done in each? No, because it's a weird team, deeply flawed team that that has had an extremely weird season.
That's why, though, that they have the voting before any of those tournaments, because if they end up making a Sweet 16 run, then Darren DeVries absolutely should be getting Coach of the Year. But obviously, it's before then. But yeah, this would be a team that the smart money would probably be early exits, but you just don't know. It would be a team that I don't think anyone would advise you to bet on. I would not recommend betting on or off, because you just don't know.
The only thing I would bet on it, always take the under. The smart money is on West Virginia's under.
Yeah, I mean, I guess except for the Utah game recently, like they have been getting over 70 points in some recent games when that's not normally the situation that they put forth. They're trying to win games 61-59 instead of 71-69. But they now appear like they are locked into the tournament, and I think there are 2 reasons why fans are still not willing to agree, or at least now it's a minority of fans that are not willing to agree here. Now it's a minority, but I think those fans fit into 2 categories. And I've said this, and one of them is not a criticism. The other one kind of is. One is, and there's fans across the country, college and pro level, that do this, and it's just common. It's not even a criticism. They only watch their team. So they're watching their team and seeing like, this team's an average team. They're very, very flawed. There's no bench. They almost blew this game. They almost blew that game. Yeah, they won, but I'm not impressed. And they don't watch anybody else in the country. They have no idea what you're talking about with Oklahoma. They don't watch anyone else. They haven't watched BYU in any other game besides the games against West Virginia. They're not watching the bubble at all. And they're sitting there saying, they don't even watch that Pitt's no longer a tournament team. They're no good. They're sitting there saying, well, West Virginia lost to Pitt, and Pitt fans are disappointed with them. So how are we a tournament team if you're a West Virginia fan? The answer is the bubble's trash, and you got to watch the rest of the country to realize what Joe Lunardi, Andy Katz are saying. The bubble's so bad. The rest of West Virginia's resume is so good. They know West Virginia's a flawed team. I'm sure no one's putting money down in those meetings that they're going to the Final Four either, but they got to give them their just due for the resume. It is an overall body of work thing, Cody. And it's honestly, this is what people want college football to be now that there's a playoff and a committee. People are mad that they basically ignore week 1, 2, 3, and 4 because they're just worried about the end of the season and they don't do overall body work enough. Like, I wish they would. If you're playing regular season, everything should count. In college basketball, they almost always, they count the whole damn thing. They count the whole thing. So those 3 ranked wins, top 10, they count. So I think that's one aspect of it, that fans are not watching everybody else and are just watching the negativity and just really focusing in on that, with their team in West Virginia. And then to kind of pivot, I think the other option is, and we know these fans exist, Cody, and they're my pet peeve. They exist with every fan base, but there's a lot of them with West Virginia. There is the WVU doomerism fan that they just are intentionally, and they are doing this whether they want to admit it or not. I even see the comments in the Facebook posts. They are intentionally looking for what's bad. They are intentionally trying to be negative, and it's almost like they secretly want the program to be bad to be able to win their argument on social media on why things have been so bad. Those fans exist, and there's always some truth. Of course, nothing's been perfect for the program, nor the athletic department, but there are fans that a team can win by 20, and then you'll have somebody comment, but they're still not going to get in because the committee hates us, and there's this conspiracy. Like, no, the committee, the people that you think are conspiring, are literally having you off the bubble and in despite losing. I don't know what, you're getting benefit of the doubt left and right nationally this year, and you got in a few years ago without 20 wins with Huggins as well. So, like, the committee has proven that they are not trying to sit there and screw over the Mountaineers. Yeah, there's some referees and some calls and different things you could point to but it's not like I could see if they were in the situation with this resume and they were on, the first 4 out or something, and you think that's unfair. But no, they've been firmly in. So just continuously pay attention to the bracketologists and the people that actually get paid big money to do it, that were doing it when we were freaking kids. So I think that's part of it too, that there is that fan, especially the WVU fan, that just weirdly is addicted and wants to be negative. And that's what they're getting up. They see an article and say, how in my brain can I comment in a negative manner on this, even if it's a positive comment, headline, or article? They want to be negative. Those people exist. And that is now they're getting exposed here a little bit. I think, there's two things exposing those people. Number one, still believing this team isn't a tournament team in the men's team. That's exposing the WVU doomerism fan. And the other part is those are the people talking about Neil Brown still. Those are people still talking about Neil Brown. If you're still talking about Neil Brown and you don't think this team is a tournament team, you fit in the category of the WVU doomerism fan. Those people do exist. They're in no way the majority. It's a loud, passionate, great fan base overall, but they're getting exposed right now because this team's locked into the tournament. And if you don't think so, you're either not paying attention or you secretly don't want them in because you want to be able to complain. And those fans exist. I even saw a Facebook comment during the Utah game, Cody, of what would it say if Eilert beats DeVries? And I restrained myself, but I wanted to comment and reply back nothing. And it would say the exact same thing. It would, Cody, it would say the same thing when Eilert beat Self, because Josh Eilert beat Bill Self.
Yeah.
What did that tell you about the two of them as coaches? Nothing. One's a Hall of Famer and he's not being taken out for one upset loss, and the other one continuously is interim who cannot get the permanent job. And that's not changing because of one upset win or even a close call against DeVries in which he still lost. Love Josh Eilert, but it tells you nothing. Tells you nothing. It's nothing. If you're making that comment, you want it to go a certain way. That's just clearly what that says. That will do it for this edition of the show. Like and subscribe, download, find us everywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, TuneIn, Google Play, etc. Also on YouTube, all of our coverage throughout Mountaineer Athletics. A very busy spring coming up is at WV Sports Now.